I paid for their dream vacation. Then they said you'd be more comfortable staying home. So I booked my own. They said it so gently, I almost missed the insult. We were finishing up dinner at Tracy's place in Dallas. A salad she barely touched, grilled salmon that had dried out in the oven, and a bottle of Chardonnay. I had brought the same kind her father and I used to drink on our anniversaries. She didn't notice that detail. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. Across the table, Brian was checking his phone again, pretending to listen. I'd flown in from Asheville that morning just to see them both together, a rare alignment these days. A family summit, Tracy called it, before the big trip. That's how she referred to it, the big trip, like a campaign launch or a merger. I smiled through it all. The flight delays, the Uber that got lost, the exhaustion sitting behind my knees. I smiled because I was proud, because I thought I was going with them. I'd paid for most of it, the villa in Tuscany, the direct flights, even the cooking class with the local chef that Tracy had insisted was too good to miss. I'd wanted this. After all the missed Christmases, the Zoom birthdays, and the texted Mother's Days, I thought this would stitch us back together. Or at least remind them I was still here. I asked somewhere between dessert and cleanup, so what should I pack? That's when the air changed. Brian looked up, blinked. Tracy's mouth opened just slightly, but no words came at first. The silence was so quick, so small, you might have missed it unless you were me. Then Tracy laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they're about to give you bad news wrapped in polite tissue paper. "Oh, Mom, you don't need to worry about that," she said, smoothing her linen napkin flat against her lap like it might give her strength. "We actually thought it might be easier for you to stay home this time." Easier. I repeated, my voice so calm it surprised even me. "Just the flights," Brian chimed in, suddenly awake. "It's long. International travel is exhausting. Jet lag's brutal. And you said your knees have been bothering you." I stared at them. These children I'd raised, who once cried when I left for teacher conferences, who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, who'd forgotten that my knees hurt from walking the dog, not from weakness, from mowing my own lawn, from standing in long grocery store lines behind people half my age who barely acknowledged I existed. "So, you're saying I'm not going?" I said it with a smile still. I think I smiled just to keep from shaking. "It's not like that," Tracy said quickly. "We just thought you'd be more comfortable at home. And it's chaotic with the kids. You know how Maya and Caleb get when they're off routine." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I'd seen this moment coming. Not this exact version, but the general arc. The way women like me quietly shift from being the center of gravity to something decorative, useful, but stationary. I finished my wine in one sip. It tasted flat now. "Oh," I said. "I see." They both leaned forward, eyes searching my face like they were hoping I'd give them a script. A graceful exit. A way to make their decision seem generous, even wise. I gave them nothing. Just the same smile I'd worn all night. The next morning, I flew back to Asheville. Alone. I stared out the plane window, watched clouds blur like half-forgotten intentions, and thought I'd just got excluded from a vacation I paid for. 3 months earlier, I'd charged nearly $18,600 to my Amex Platinum card to reserve a villa in the hills outside Cortona. Tuscany. 3 bedrooms, infinity pool, private chef who made handmade PC pasta and brought his own olive oil. Tracy had sent me the link late one night with a text that read, dreamy, way out of budget, though. I had replied, "Book it." I remembered the click, that soft, final sound as I confirmed the reservation. Funny how a single click can mark the end of something you didn't realize was ending. At home, I didn't turn on the lights. I slipped off my shoes, hung my coat, and poured myself a small glass of Campari over ice, a bitter ritual my late husband Jim had passed on to me. The taste hit like memory, sharp, unapologetic. My house cedar, paneled open, shelved perched quietly on the hillside, welcomed me the way only empty houses do. Steady, unmoved. I didn't cry. Instead, I made tea. Then walked into the study that used to double as my remote teaching space during the pandemic. Tucked behind the bookshelf was a rosewood lockbox, polished to a soft sheen. Inside were things no one had ever asked about: letters from Jim, old photos, and one envelope embossed with the silver insignia of Belmond. A gift certificate, unredeemed, for the Venice Simplon Orient Express, that gloriously unnecessary train that takes you from Paris to Venice in Art Deco cars and white-gloved service. I had bought it for myself 6 years ago, the first birthday I spent without him. I imagined myself wearing my black Max Mara dress, sipping champagne while the Dolomites rolled past. But I'd never used it. Life kept getting in the way. Or maybe I just kept saying yes to everything but myself. Underneath it was a postcard of a bookstore in Lisbon, Livraria Bertrand, the oldest in the world. Jim and I always said we'd go. We never did. That night I opened my laptop. The login screen reflected my face, older than I remembered, softer in places, sharper in others. But the eyes were still mine. I typed Lisbon, direct flight. Tap Portugal had a seat available. Aisle, departure Saturday, $1.76. I added a 4-night stay at a boutique hotel in Alfama with river views and a breakfast courtyard shaded by orange trees. Booked. Then I opened my bank app. Savings, $62 or $713. Treasury bonds, about $30,000. Debt, 0. Dependents, none. Excuses officially expired. I packed light. A Loro Piana shawl in plum, soft as silk, but warmer than memory. Low-heeled Ferragamo flats I'd once stored for a special occasion. That one lipstick, Revlon's Cherries in the Snow, the same one I wore on my first anniversary. I hadn't worn it since Jim's funeral. Not because of grief, because somewhere along the way, I stopped dressing for myself. And finally, I pulled out the old leather notebook from my top drawer. The one I used to keep lesson plans in, the one I hadn't touched in years. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "To the woman they forgot to invite, I see you. Let's go." I hadn't flown alone in over 30 years. The last time I was 42, headed to a teaching conference in Chicago. Jim had packed my bag while I stood in the doorway worrying about leaving the kids for 2 nights. I'd cried in the cab. Now no one even knew I was gone. Lisbon met me with the scent of sea air and exhaust. Warm wind tangled my hair as I stepped out of the arrivals terminal, dragging a suitcase that still had a tag from a cruise I never took. The taxi driver asked in accented English, "Where to, Senora?" I handed him a piece of paper. The Hotel das Figueiras, tucked into the hills of Alfama. White walls, blue shutters, and a balcony that promised a sliver of river if I leaned far enough. The drive there wound through narrow streets painted with graffiti and old pride. The buildings were chipped and stunning their age, showing like mine without apology. Clotheslines stretched between windows like conversations. The receptionist greeted me with a smile that didn't overcompensate. She addressed me as Madam Mayfield, not sweetie or ma'am, and for that alone, I nearly wept. My room was on the third floor, no elevator. I insisted on the stairs. Once inside, I set my suitcase by the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. It creaked beneath me, an honest sound. The floor was tiled in soft terracotta, cool against my palms when I knelt to unpack. I didn't cry. I just paused. Grief doesn't always show up in tears. Sometimes it's just silence in a foreign room, with the window open and the world continuing outside, unaware you've just done something seismic. I hung up my shawl in the closet, lined my shoes near the nightstand, and placed my notebook on the desk. Then I walked to the mirror. The sunlight made my hair look more silver than white. My eyes looked tired, not in a sad way, more in the way an engine hums after driving cross-country, not broken, just full of miles. I opened my purse, found the Revlon lipstick, and for the first time in years put it on. Lightly. No performance. Just a quiet act of return. I had no one to impress. That I realized was the power of it. Outside the city murmured not loudly, not impatiently, like it was waiting for me but without urgency. So I went. I wandered uphill into the early evening. The streets were slick with life-uneven stone and voices layered over one another. A guitarist played a sad tune beneath a tangle of bougainvillea. A woman on a second-floor balcony watered plants and didn't glance down. At a corner cafe, I ordered sardinas grelladas and a glass of vino verde. The waiter was young, tattooed, and gentle. He didn't rush me. He didn't ask if I was waiting for anyone. I ate slowly. I didn't check my phone once. No one was waiting for an update from me anyway. I walked without a map that first night. I didn't need one. Every turn in Alfama felt like a memory I hadn't lived yet. Worn stone steps leading into open courtyards, voices spilling from shuttered windows, the smell of grilled fish and salt and evening. A stray cat brushed past my ankles. I smiled. I don't know why, maybe just because it didn't flinch. On Rua da Saudade, I stumbled into a bookstore barely wider than a hallway. Wooden shelves towered above me like cathedral walls. No glossy bestsellers, no plastic. Just books that smelled of time. That's where I met Renata. She was sitting behind the counter sketching in a leather-bound notebook. Her hair was gray, thick, and wild, the kind of gray that isn't trying to be silver. She looked up, and instead of saying, "Can I help you?" she said, "American?" I laughed. Was it the shoes or the face? Both, she said, smiling. But not in a bad way. She told me she was from São Paulo, a retired calligrapher, 69 years old, divorced twice. Now she spent her time traveling alone, buying old notebooks and writing in them with the care she used to reserve for clients. We talked for nearly an hour about books, about how invisible you become after 70, about how no one tells you that freedom and loneliness come wrapped in the same paper. Before I left, she said, "Come to Porto with me. I leave Thursday. The train's slow and charming like us." I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no. Back at the hotel, I took off my shoes, made a cup of chamomile tea, and stood on the tiny balcony. Lisbon flickered below me, soft light, soft noise. I looked down at my feet. Swollen, yes, but still my own, still willing. I opened my notebook and wrote, "There is a woman inside me I have not yet fully met. She does not ask permission. She does not wait to be invited." And beneath that, I added, "I might go to Porto." The next morning I did. I texted no one. The train moved slowly along the coast, its rhythm comforting like a rocking chair in a quiet afternoon. I watched the sea roll in and out like it had nothing to prove. Renata and I shared a compartment. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. At one point, she pulled out a worn silver fountain pen and began writing on a fresh page. She caught me watching and said simply, "I'm listing the things I thought I'd always be too old to do." Then she looked up. "You," I thought for a moment, then answered, "I think I'm finally starting the list." In Porto, everything felt a little softer. The streets were wider than Lisbon's, the air cooler, the sky, a kind of blue that made you slow down just to look at it longer. Dorothy Mayfield, 74, widow retired teacher, mother of 2, occasional babysitter, quiet benefactor. That version of me still existed. But she no longer traveled alone. Something new had joined me. Not someone, just something unspoken. A shift. We stayed in a guest house overlooking the Douro River, run by a woman named Beatrice, who wore linen tunics and bare feet and served us espresso in antique porcelain cups as if we were old friends. My room had lace curtains and a writing desk that looked like it had survived 2 wars and a love affair. I unpacked slower this time, deliberately. I hung up my Max Mara dress not because I had plans to wear it, but because it felt like a declaration. I placed my notebook on the desk. I lined up my shoes without needing to. I was nesting not because I was staying, but because I was arriving. That evening, I asked Renata to take a photo of me, not posed, not smiling at a monument. Just me standing on the terrace in the gold light of 6 p.m. shawl draped over my shoulders, wind in my hair. Later, I looked at it. I didn't look younger. I didn't look radiant, but I looked alive. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen that in a photo of myself. We walked the city slowly. No rush. No need to be anywhere. At a vintage shop tucked behind a tiled bakery, I bought a pair of red leather gloves, the kind I used to admire on other women, but never dared wear. Too much, I'd told myself. Too loud. Too bold. Too something. They fit perfectly. Renata watched me with that amused, generous look older women give each other when they recognize a door opening. "You're getting louder," she said. "I'm tired of whispering," I replied. That night, we shared a bottle of Barcavella, a wine I'd read about once in a travel magazine, but never dreamed I'd taste. It cost 240, and for a full minute, I hesitated. Renata just looked at me and said, "You've spent more than that on silence." She was right. I drank slowly. Every sip tasted like something I thought I'd lost. Not youth, but choice. On our 3rd day in Porto, I woke up early and walked alone to the riverside. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The Douro shimmered like a secret. I sat on a stone bench that overlooked the water, pulled out my notebook, and turned to a clean page. At the top, I wrote, "Things I regret apologizing for." I sat with the pen for a long time before writing anything down. Eventually, I began, for not being available every single holiday, for saying no to babysitting during my colonoscopy recovery, for choosing not to remarry after gym, for telling Brian I didn't want to loan him money for the 3rd time, for spending money on myself, for wanting to go on the Tuscany trip instead of just funding it. The list went on. 2 pages front and back. There were no tears. Only a kind of quiet clarity. I realized I had spent years asking permission to be my own person and being told directly or indirectly that my time had passed, that I was lucky just to be included, that my role was now support, not presence. And I had accepted it. Kindly, lovingly, repeatedly. I'd accepted the back seat in my own life, but not anymore. Not now. Not after tasting the aged wine of a land I chose to visit for no other reason than I wanted to. Not after laughing with a woman I hadn't known a week ago, who treated me like a peer, not a relic. I closed the notebook, pressed the cover shut, like sealing a vow, and sat there in the morning air. Not lonely, not sad, just awake. When I got back to the guest house, Renata was in the courtyard, sketching with her silver fountain pen. She looked up, squinting into the sun. "You walked," she said. "Yes. Did you find anything I found me?" She nodded, like that made perfect sense. That evening, something strange happened. Tracy texted me. "Mom, where are you? Are you home? Brian said he hasn't heard from you either. You're not answering FaceTime." For a moment, I considered replying. Just got back from a wine tasting on the terrace of a 300-year-old estate. Life's short. Have fun in Tuscany. Or maybe just, I'm safe. I'm fine. You don't have to worry. But I didn't say any of those things. Instead, I opened the camera roll on my phone. Found the photo Renata had taken me, standing on the balcony, hair caught in wind, wrapped in my plum shawl, holding a glass of wine in one hand and a notebook in the other. I sent that. No caption. Letter interpret. A few minutes later, a second message came in, this one from Maya. "Hey, Grandma. Mom's freaking out a bit. I told her you probably just needed space. I get it. I mean, I don't fully get it, but I think I will when I'm older. I hope wherever you are, you're doing something for you. Love you." That one made my throat catch. I replied with a voice memo. My voice sounded older than I expected, but also stronger. "I'm okay, sweetheart. More than okay. I'm not running away. I'm just remembering who I was before everyone needed me to be someone else. Tell your mom I'm fine, and tell her she doesn't have to understand. I didn't leave in anger. I left in truth." There was a long pause before her message came back. Just a photo, a sketch Maya had drawn. It was of a woman standing on a hilltop, wind in her hair, her coat open wide like wings. The caption said, "She didn't vanish. She unfolded." I didn't intend to go back to Asheville so soon. But I wasn't running from Portugal. I just felt ready. Like the chapter wasn't ending, only widening. When I stepped off the plane and smelled the thick green air of home, I felt different. Not younger, not lighter, just more solid. Like I'd re-entered my life with both feet on the ground instead of one always dangling, waiting for permission to land. The house looked the same. My neighbor had watered the plants. The mail had piled up coupons, catalogs, and one envelope from a financial advisor I hadn't spoken to in years. I unpacked slowly. I put the red leather gloves in the front closet. I placed my wine-stained notebook on the kitchen table where it belonged. I brewed myself tea in the mug that said, "World's okayest, Grandma." A joke gift from Maya. It used to sting. Now it made me laugh. I hadn't told anyone I was back, not Brian, not Tracy, not even Maya. But it didn't take long. By the next morning, I had 8 missed calls. 4 from Tracy, 2 from Brian, and 2 from unknown. I let them all go to voicemail. At noon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised to see them on the porch. Brian looked tired, disheveled in that too polished kind of way, like he'd come straight from a work conference. Tracy wore oversized sunglasses, though it wasn't sunny. "Mom," she said, her voice already wading into apology territory. "You're back." "I am," I said, not moving from the threshold. Brian exhaled. "We were worried. You disappeared." I tilted my head. "I didn't disappear. I booked a flight." "Same as you." They exchanged a glance that quick, silent communication siblings develop from years of covering for each other. "Could we come in?" Tracy asked. I paused, then opened the door halfway. "5 minutes," I said. "I've got a virtual museum tour in Lisbon I don't want to miss." It was a lie, of course, but it felt good. They sat stiffly on the couch like they were the guests now. And in some ways they were. "Mom," Brian began, "we just want to say, we didn't mean to what I asked calmly. Leave me out. Assume I wouldn't mind funding your dream vacation while staying home with the sprinkler schedule." Tracy winced. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I asked. "Tell me. I'm listening." She didn't answer. Neither did Brian. So I spoke again. "I raised you to be strong. I didn't raise you to be careless with the people who love you. And I didn't spend my life building independence just to have it taken from me quietly through polite suggestions and soft exclusions." They didn't speak, but they listened. That was enough for now. They sat there quiet now. In their silence, I saw it, not remorse exactly, but recognition. The slow dawning that I wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to plead, wasn't going to smooth it over like I used to. I poured myself a glass of water. Didn't ask if they wanted any. I said when your father died, I kept showing up. For birthdays, for holidays, for babysitting, for things I was never invited to be a part of, only needed for. I kept saying yes, thinking it would tether us together. That love meant being available always. I looked at them, but love has shape, and mine was starting to disappear. Tracy took off her sunglasses finally. Her eyes looked a little raw around the edges. "I guess we didn't think it would matter, that you'd want to rest, that travel would be too much." I smiled gently. "I don't need rest. I need respect." Brian leaned forward, elbows on knees. "We really didn't mean to hurt you, Mom." "I know," I said. "But you did. And now I'm doing something about it." They waited for what I'm not sure. A punishment. A scolding. Maybe some neat closure they could take back to their spouses like a lesson learned. But I wasn't here to teach anymore. Not like that. "I've made some changes," I said. "Nothing dramatic, but clear." I picked up a small stack of papers from the countercopies of a new revocable living trust, a power of attorney update, and a revised will. Everything signed, everything filed. "I've decided to shift my financial legacy," I said. "Not out of spite, out of intention." They blinked. "I've chosen to leave the bulk of my estate to causes and people who reflect the values I want to see outlive me. That includes an arts education grant I'm setting up with my old school and a travel fund for Maya. She's the only one who asked how I was not just where I'd gone." Tracy opened her mouth to object, but I held up my hand. Not angrily, just firmly. "This isn't a negotiation. It's information. I'm not cutting anyone out. I'm cutting myself in." Silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was sobering. I walked them to the door. No hugs, just eye contact. At the threshold, Brian turned. So what now? Now, I said, I live. I read books in cafes without checking the time. I buy the wine I want. I wear red lipstick before noon. And maybe, if you earn it back, maybe one day, I let you meet the woman I've become. He didn't know what to say. Neither did she. So I closed the door gently. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like someone's mother walking back into her kitchen. I felt like someone's self. 2 months later, I planted lavender in the front yard. Not because it's easy to grow. North Carolina clay doesn't lend itself to Mediterranean stubbornness, but because it reminded me of something I didn't want to forget. The convent garden in Sintra. The way the air smelled like quiet courage. The memory of sitting on a stone bench beside Renata as we passed a bottle of Vinho Verde back and forth, laughing about nothing. No demands, no clock. No one needing us. That scent stayed with me longer than the wine. I never liked yard work. Jim used to do it. When he passed, Brian paid for a service. Now I dig my own holes. I plant what I want. Bad soil or not. I kneel in the dirt and wipe sweat from my neck with the edge of a monogrammed linen napkin I stole from the Belmond Hotel in Lisbon. Yes, I took it. One. Small. Napkin. Not because I needed a souvenir, because I needed a reminder that I was there, that I mattered. These days, I no longer feel the need to keep everything so neat. I let my shawl stay tossed across the kitchen chair. I leave books face down, halfway read. I light candles at breakfast. And I stopped asking myself if that's wasteful. I wasted too much already on silence, on obligation, on shrinking to fit. Most mornings I walk to the cafe at the end of Oak Street. A little place called Juneberry, owned by a woman my age named Colette, who always wears huge silver earrings and plays jazz from an old record player in the corner. The barista Jamie, 21, pierced nose, kind eyes, now calls me Dorothy. Not sweetheart, not ma'am, not grandma, just Dorothy. That shouldn't feel like a victory, but it does. I sit at the corner table by the window. I bring my black leather notebook, the one I started in Portugal, and write without purpose. Some days it's memories. Some days it's nonsense. Some days it's just a grocery list, but I write it in cursive because I can. Once a man asked if he could share my table. I said no. He looked confused. I smiled and said, "Nothing personal. I just enjoy my own company these days." I think that was the first time in my life I said that out loud. Last Tuesday, I started outlining a travel blog, not for fame or followers, but because stories have weight, and I'm tired of mine being carried by everyone but me. I called it the Lavender Bench. I don't know if I'll publish it. But I bought the domain name. That felt official. And then one quiet afternoon, as I was sipping a cappuccino and underlining a passage from Mrs. Dalloway with a fountain pen. Yes, a real one. Silver, nibbed, absurdly indulgent, I heard a voice behind me. "Grandma." I turned. There she was. Maya. She looked older. Not by years, but by shape, her edges sharper, her eyes quieter. The kind of quiet that comes from seeing things. "I didn't know you were back," she said, sliding into the chair across from me like it wasn't a question. "I wasn't sure I was," I said, "until I started planting lavender." She gave me a small smile, not the sweet performative one, the real kind, the kind you give someone who earned it. Then she pulled a notebook out of her canvas bag. Black leather. Just like mine. "I bought one," she said. "I've been writing." And in that moment, I felt it again, that quiet shift inside me. The click of something unspoken falling into place. Not legacy, not obligation, but connection. Real, chosen, not inherited, but built. We didn't talk much after that. We just wrote. Side by side. Two women, 74 and 20, in a corner cafe, no longer shrinking. After coffee, Maya and I walked the long way back to my house through the park, past the rose garden that had just started blooming again. She didn't ask questions like her mother would have. She didn't ask for explanations or timelines or reasons why the trip had changed me. She just walked beside me. Sometimes that's the only kind of understanding that matters. When we reached the house, she hesitated at the gate. "I don't want to overstay," she said. I smiled. "You're not." I planted a second chair in the garden for a reason. We sat outside sipping cold tea and watching the bees lazily circle the lavender. The sun dipped slowly over the pine trees, and for a moment, everything felt suspended, like life had pressed pause just to let us catch our breath. After a while, she turned to me and said, "It's weird, but I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time." I looked down at my hands, older lined, still steady. That's because I said I finally stopped disappearing. She didn't answer right away, but her eyes filled just slightly. Later that evening after she left, I walked through the house barefoot, not because I had to, but because I liked the feel of wood under my soles. I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, opened my notebook, and on the final page, I wrote, "The return is not going back. It is arriving on your own terms." I folded the page, placed it in the envelope that once held the unused Tuscany itinerary, and tucked it away not out of shame, but out of peace. I do not regret funding that villa, but I no longer mourn not seeing it, because what I've built here with lavender notebooks and silence finally filled with my own voice is mine. And I've learned something simple, something late, something I wish more of us could know sooner. You don't have to be invited to your own life. You only have to arrive. If this story stirred something in you, maybe it's time to stop asking permission and start showing up exactly as you are. Leave a comment and tell us, what part of your life are you finally reclaiming? And if these stories feel like home, subscribe to Eleanor Speaks. There's always a seat at the table. You're not too late. You're just right on time.